Good afternoon and welcome to Artefact Live with me, Scott McArthur, where we look at the art and science of storytelling. Well, it's been a couple of weeks since we've been on, one by disaster because technology failed, and two, I had a holiday. I was in Devon last week with my family and it was fantastic. We did all sorts of stuff. We had intentions of surfing, but I wasn't brave enough to go in the rain, and therefore we didn't do it. But we'll do it next time. We'll do it next time. So just a bit of a recap, because we're on, believe it or not, the 53rd show. All in all now, I've done about 370 hours of live broadcasting in the last 12 months, but including my music show. So it's been quite ridiculous. But the 53rd show, unbelievable. And last week, the last show, the 52nd show, if you remember, we had the amazing Mariana Polka on, who is, I think the best way to describe Mariana from last time is a force of nature. I mean, this is a young girl from Glasgow who lifted herself out of Glasgow when she was 17, went to New York with no qualifications, nothing, studied acting and directing, and now has 10 Emmys to her name. And what a character she was. It was fantastic. So, and the response has been terrific. So thank you ever so much for the response. That's been really, really appreciated by everybody. And I think the art of film story and telling a story through film and images and words is something that we've got a lot to learn from. So I'll come back, and Marianne's quite keen to come back on again. So we'll get her back on when our next film comes out, and we'll have a chat with her about how she goes about it. I tried to tease out, if you've watched it, I tried to tease out some of the key things that are there for a filmmaker to make a world-class film. We only just scratched the surface. So thanks again, Marianne. I know you like to tune in, so thanks very much from tuning in from stateside. So this week we're completing what I call it's a bit of a trilogy about trauma, the trauma trilogy on here, because we're coming back to this trauma subject, which has had a fair bit of feedback. I've had very positive feedback. I've had some quite challenging feedback to what my guests have said. And I had a friend up my sleeve that I was dying to ask to get her to come onto the show, because Madeleine Black is I think she's a force of nature, and I absolutely cannot recommend her book. I've got a book here actually. I can't recommend that book highly enough, and we'll come back to that when she joins us. But I think there's a truly traumatic story here, but it's not that I want to focus on. It's why does she talk about trauma? How did she? I mean, she's butterfly-like because the trauma, and I'm sure she'll tell us about it. But the story is traumatic even to listen to it, but to experience it, well, I can't imagine. So let's get the wonderful Madeleine Black on, and let's have a chat. Good afternoon.
Hi, Scott. How are you? Got my head gushing there.
Are you well?
I'm good, thank you. How you doing?
Yeah. I'm all right. You're in Glasgow, aren't you?
Yeah, and I can't believe a Scotsman never went in the water in Devon. I mean, come on.
Oh, I know.
What a wuss.
The weird thing is,
I was in the water in Harris.
were you? Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic! That's a bit.
Wetsuit, but yeah.
That's a different kettle of fish to the water in Devon. It's like in a bath in Devon compared to Harris.
Exactly.
I love Harris. Is a wonderful part of the country.
Beautiful.
Yeah, but some of the best black pudding in the world.
well, and some of the best beaches. The beaches are just phenomenal in the Outer Hebrides.
Yeah, absolutely. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You know what we're all about. It's about storytelling, and you have a story to tell. But can you let everyone know, what it is that you do, and then maybe I'll ask you two questions: what it is you do, but then secondly, how did you get to be this storyteller? And it's amazing what you're doing. I just want to listen to you telling your story, to be honest. But would that be all right for us to kick off?
Sure. Well, I guess I do a few things. So I am a trained psychotherapist, but I stopped doing that a couple of years ago to focus on sharing my story, because I first shared my story with the Forgiveness Project about 7 years ago. They are an organization in London run by an amazing woman called Marina Cantacuzino. And I don't know if you've heard what she calls us. She doesn't call us storytellers. She calls us story healers.
Oh, I used that. I nicked that in the advert. It's brilliant.
It's fabulous, isn't it? So she really believes, like me, the power that comes when we share our stories. And so I started to become a speaker, but obviously, as we know, COVID struck. So my career was just going up in the world, and then it's kind of paused, or it's suspended. I don't know where it is at the moment in the speaking world. But I really discovered that sharing our story, it's not for me anymore. It's really what it can do for other people. And I guess I'm just passionate about ending the shame, the stigma, and silence, because, as you know, my story is one of sexual violence, and sadly, it's a very, very common story.
Yes.
There's so much rape, abuse going on everywhere, somewhere on this planet every day. A man, a woman, or a child will experience sexual violence. And I've also, I guess, the gift of lockdown, I've
Yes.
become a podcaster, and it is
Yeah.
all about storytelling. So my book is called Unbroken because I really believe that none of us are broken beyond repair. And the podcast is called Unbroken Healing Through Storytelling because I think when we hear other people's stories, it gives us hope. And there was so much doom and gloom in lockdown. I just thought I want to share some positivity, some
Yes.
to motivate people that even though things are pretty dark at the moment, look like we were just going to be locked down forever at one point. There's always hope, there's always choices. Things can't stay in one place forever. And, a lot of stories, people will say to me, I might not have the same story as the person you interviewed this week, but so much resonated with me. And I
Mm.
think that's what comes when we share our stories. It's healing for the storyteller and the person that's listening to the story. So yeah, like you, I love storytelling.
So, in terms of, I mean, one of the things that, and I have to confess, I've struggled with it is, and I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about people who have a significant trauma and then who maybe write a book or, like you did, they maybe do a TED talk or something about it. And I can get that. And this is, I mean, I've got no idea what I'm talking about here. So I'm after education here. But I then think, my goodness, what must it be like reliving that trauma over and over again? And,
Yeah,
and is that a good thing?
you know what? I don't relive it. I would
No.
never ever use the stage for my therapy. I can
Ah,
only
right.
do this because I'm so okay. In fact, if anything, I would say I've got post-traumatic growth. You can
Yeah,
grow
yeah,
through what you go through.
yeah.
But standing on that TEDx stage in Glasgow, there were 2,000 people in the audience, so I was a little bit terrified. But I was both terrified and liberated. It was so liberating to just say, this is me and this is my story, and you know what, I'm okay. And instantly I got feedback from people. I had
Yeah.
fantastic head teacher in Renfrew near to Glasgow contact me to say one of his young pupils that was listening that day got in contact to say it had been her story 3 years prior by an uncle, and I've now met her. I've been to the school concert, I've been to school to meet this girl. She's amazing.
Gosh.
And she said if she hadn't heard me, she'd never have spoken out about it. And now he's being charged. They discovered he was also interfering with her sister in another way. And
Yeah.
yeah, she said, hearing me speak, she thought if she can stand up there and speak, then she's got to tell someone her story. So to me, that's the power of sharing our stories. When we speak and we're heard, then we heal. We really
Mm.
do. If somebody listens to what we're saying.
We speak, we're heard, and we heal. That's lovely. I
Yeah.
really like that. So what is it? Do you think? I mean, you've done 63 shows, I think.
Yes, this week is
Yeah.
number 63. Yep.
Yeah. What are there any sort of trends emerging, or is there anything you're seeing that's a surprise, maybe, or you know?
Oh, people are just amazing, really, aren't they? They're
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
super resilient. And
Yeah.
I was very specific. I guess it's a bit of a niche. I wanted to interview
Yeah.
people that have been through tough times, but have overcome adversity, faced many challenges, and now they've not just bounced back, they've bounced forward. So I guess I
Mm,
really speak to people that are thrivers. And,
right.
I'm lucky. I have a couple of famous pals, and I've interviewed one of them, Colin Jackson. And you think the most famous people would be the most popular episodes, but actually, it's interesting. It's not my very first person I interviewed. Still, the most popular one. You may know him. He's Mike Haynes. He is
Oh
from
yeah.
Dundee. So his
Yeah.
brother David sadly was murdered by ISIS, and they put the beheading of the
Terrible.
video on TV many years ago.
Hmm.
But straight away he came from a place of forgiveness, and he didn't want there to be hate in his name or his brother's name, because then the terrorists are winning. And he does amazing work around the world globally, just about respect and about being united as one. We're more similar than we are different, I guess, is what his message is. And
Yes.
people are just blown away by what
Mm.
we're able to achieve if we choose to.
Mm. I mean, that was one of the parts of your book that I mean, I thought it was incredible when I mean, we haven't really described your story, but do you want to tell your story briefly, or will we just assume, or what would you rather
Yeah,
do?
so my
You tell it
story,
briefly.
Sure, when I was 13, I had a night out. I guess it went very wrong, and it resulted in me being gang raped or tortured by two men for
Yes.
4 to 5 hours, which obviously had a huge impact on my life, but lots and
Yes.
lots of therapy, many different kind of therapeutic body treatments, and
Yes.
adjusting my mindset, really choosing to forgive, which was a personal choice. I'm not a forgiveness preacher. I don't tell people that's the only way, to
Yeah.
heal. But
Yeah.
that's really what set me free, just letting
Yeah.
go of all the anger eventually. But it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. This is a
Yes.
culmination of years and years of work and determination to clean up the mess from the trauma.
Yes.
So yeah, that is my story.
I mean, that was the bit of the book and in your TEDx talk that it really resonated with me. I mean, I thought it was incredible that you were able to forgive. I mean, I think I can't remember the exact words, but you mean you're not able to forget, but you're able to forgive. I mean, I think that's quite beautiful, and I think that is a certainly when I read the story, I was like, yeah, I get that. You know, I don't know how to do it myself. I've never had to do it, but I it resonated with me. You know, the importance of that
Yeah, I
forgiveness.
guess, the first person I had to forgive was me because all I was just a naive 13-year-old. But for years, like most survivors of sexual violence, because of all the rape blaming messages that were fed into culture, I thought it was my fault, that I was guilty. I brought it on myself. And that took me many, many years to realize actually, no, these two men chose to hurt me and rape me. Nothing to do with me, what I was drinking, what I was
No,
wearing. It came down to them at the end of the day. But that self-blame, self-loathing, guilt, that took years to really work that
gosh,
layer by layer.
gosh. So how do you now, having had that experience, that trauma, you've adopted that forgiveness perspective,
Hmm.
if you meet someone who has had who is maybe in that early stage,
Hmm.
you know, and I'm not asking you to be a therapist, I'm just wanting the story really, you know, how do you help them? You know, because it's one of these things, it's a bit like a lot of things in life when you meet somebody and you don't know what to say.
Yeah.
You know, how the hell can, you know, how do you talk to somebody who's been through that experience?
You can even just say that. I don't know what to say. Just be
Ah, right,
real.
okay.
Just be yourself. And that's the thing, that's people know when we're genuine and when we're not. It took me many
Yeah.
therapists because I would look them in the eyes, say what I had to say, and thought, oh, they can't hear what I have to say. You can just tell, even if there's no words spoken. But
Right.
really, from a therapeutic point of view, I would just go at my client's pace,
Mm,
never push them any further, never go back any further, just work where they're at. And I also think because my course was very experiential and we had to do the work. If I can't go to those dark chapters within my life, how can I expect to travel there with my clients? So
yes.
it's a
Yes.
brilliant job because it's always one that works me as well. I have to
Mm,
be very aware, a lot of personal development so that I can be the best therapist that I could be. So
yes. Yes.
I've done that journey. I've sat in both seats many times. I've been the therapist and I've been the client for both of
Mm,
them for many
mm,
years. So yeah, I think always go at the client's pace because you can tell them things over and over and over, and if they're not open to hearing it, oh, but, and you can hear they're just caught in excuses at that point, or they're caught in self-blame and shame. And I think that's one of the hardest things to work through, to eradicate the shame.
yeah. There's two things I want to ask you connected to that. One of them is about directly, the other one's indirect. So I'll ask the direct one, which is about the word shame.
Yeah.
There seems to be an awful lot of shaming going on in the media and
Yeah.
on the internet and on LinkedIn. It's everywhere. You can't get away from it. You know, if you're a white middle class male, you've got all this stuff you've got to deal with. If you're white, you've got to go deal with all this stuff. If you're black, you've got to deal with all that stuff. If you're straight, you've got to deal with. I mean, there is a lot of it. Um,
The shame culture.
there is a shame culture, and I kind of I what's the word? I worry about it because I don't think anything good can come from shame. You know, because it's just a negative aspect. If you're making people, I mean, there's a lot of self-flagellation as well, which is
Mm.
I equally think is not productive. What do you think? Have I got that wrong, or
No,
no?
absolutely. It's the reason it keeps so many victims silent because they think, well, if I say this, someone will say, well, what do you expect? You went up to his hotel room or you were wearing this. We
Right.
see it all the time. There was a case quite a few years ago in Ireland, and the judge said to the female survivor, well, you were wearing lacy thongs.
Oh,
And you think, well, actually, if he's down to your underwear, he's obviously taken your clothes off. lacy thongs do not cause rape.
No.
Rapists cause rape. 100% of all rapes are caused by rapists.
Rapists.
But the only way for me to work my shame at the end of the day was to step into my shame. So by sharing my story, standing on that stage in front of 2,000 people and grounding myself and knowing that the shame might creep up, but I'm not, I'm not what happened to me. I'm not my body. I'm not all those things that were done to me. But it's such a, I guess, intimate crime that we turn it inwards and we turn it onto ourselves and we look to ourselves to make sense of it. Well, I could have done this and I could have done that. Actually, no, you couldn't. And when you start to stop self-blaming and self-loathing, I think that is really the most healing part of any journey. You were never to blame. It was never your fault. Never.
No. Terrible. Absolutely. I hate that. You remember that Jodie Foster film about it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Accused. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So the second thing that it's really about storytelling, and one of the things I encourage people to be is an archaeologist of their own life. I want them to go back and unearth their own stories, and tell their own stories, because I believe we're all storytellers. But one of the things I get quite often from people is I can't remember anything, Scott. I'm in my 60s, and it's a long time ago. How do you go about it? I mean, a very traumatic experience like you just described. I can imagine that remains in the dendrites. But when you're writing a book like you did, and then telling stories like you do, how do you go about it? Is there a way you do it, or do you sit down and what do you do?
It's interesting because of the trauma. It blocked out for years, so I didn't remember it.
Oh,
It disappeared.
right.
You think it would still be in there. It is in there, but it was in such a deep level because it's just normal to depress it and suppress it, and you don't want to go to these places. So you do everything to avoid it, which is why you have all the impact of what happened to you. All the numbing out, everything that you do to avoid going to those spaces. Till eventually you realize, actually, I'm going to have to step into these dark chapters in order to heal these places. But once I made that decision to write my book, it was like I just vomited the words, really. I decided that I was going to write my story. I'd actually been to hear an amazing storyteller, a woman called Marion Partington. You might have heard of her. She's also with the Forgiveness Project.
Right.
And her sister Lucy had been murdered by the serial killers Rose and Fred West. And all the Forgiveness Project events are in London, and Marion was coming up to Glasgow, and they said she's at a school in Shawlands. Is that near you? I said, well, it's about 2 minutes up the road. So I got to meet her, and I just saw the impact of her sharing her story on the audience. It was, you could hear a pin drop to start with, but it was just, she just mesmerized them all, that power. People had very different stories, but they saw she came to a place of forgiveness. And with the Forgiveness Project, I've done it too. They have a group that they call Restore, and we go into prisons and we share our story. So the whole 3-4 day workshop is based really on storytelling, because it unlocks so many things. When somebody hears someone else, it gives them permission to share their story, and it's like a domino effect. It just it goes around the group. And the whole aim of our 3-day course is really to share your life story, because like I said in my TEDx, when we hold it all in, we hold ourselves back. But everybody's got stories, and I guess if you're struggling, just keep a little notebook, and just whenever something pops into your head, just write it down. But I think maybe that also comes from a place of saying, well, she's got a big story and mine's nothing like that. Everybody's got stories, funny things, bad things, good things. It's not about comparison, really, is it? We play this comparison game all the time. It doesn't make mine better or worse than anyone else's, because at the end of the day, as well, as you know, I think it's what we do with what happens to us. That's what really matters. It's not really what happens to us. So I guess when people say that they're worried that it's not a good story, but if they dig in there, if they really want to find it, there's diamonds in everyone, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. And it's why I get quite often I'm asked to help with corporates when they're doing talks, and they start spewing out, Simon Sinek and all the usual rubbish that people just spew out. And it's, everybody does the same bloody talk, and it's really tedious. And I always say to them, no, do you want to be like everybody else? And they all look at you and go, well, it's a good story. I said, but what about you? And it can quite often take months, because they're so resistant to telling their own story. It's
the barrier to get through.
It is. I mean, one of my, I don't know if you've come across Krista Tippett. Have you come across On Being at all? It's my favorite podcast, and it's a very, very successful podcast. And I mean, I'm a evangelical atheist, and
Uh-huh.
she is an evangelical. So she's from the other side of the world, with the other completely different. But the first question she always asks is this. She says, what was your spiritual upbringing like, whether you had it or not? And every time, boom, it doesn't matter if she's asking, the most radical atheist or
Mm-hmm.
the most holy of holies, they all have that common experience, and out come the
Yes.
stories, and
Yeah.
it was kind of the reason why I went for the name of this vlog, because I believe that artifacts like these things behind me can
Mm-hmm.
help people remember, what the story was, and if you don't need to practice your own story because you know it, but
No, we
people,
know our stories, yes.
yeah, they take a long time sometimes. So go back one little step about the writing of the book. This is something that, again, I get asked quite a lot about. How do you? I don't know how to put this without sounding crass, but people have said to me, how do you pad out a book? From one idea, to a whole book. How do you go? What's the mental process that you go through?
Well,
I went through
I
it,
don't know if
but
I'm the best person to ask. I mean, I don't even have an English O level, so anyone can write a book, honestly, if I can do it. And it was actually
yeah,
after I met Marion Partington in
ah,
Shawlands Academy that time. I listened to her and was mesmerized as well, like
yeah,
everyone in the audience. And wasn't speaking or writing at that point. I'd shared my story, but that was all. And
yes,
inside her book that I bought that night, which is called If You Sit Very Still, it's a beautiful book. She had written, Now You Must Speak. And I thought, oh, I could share my story. I could see the impact that she had on people. And I'd been asked to write my story down. I've been going to a teacher of life for many years, a man named Imaho. And that was really the start of my writing. I'd written that just before, about 12 pages. And once I made the decision to write my story, literally, the words just came to me. So I feel like somebody, whoever was
yeah,
assisting me, because I literally, at night, I couldn't sleep. All the words would come into my head, and I'd sit down at my Mac the next day, and I just kind of pluck these words out and just write and write
yeah.
and write. And in about 8 weeks, I had written 70,000 words. So
Wow,
I
wow,
always kind of feel it really did write itself.
yeah.
It just kind of vomited out of me, which is a weird thing to say.
I remember I interviewed, if you know, Ewan Morrison is a Scottish
Mhm.
writer, and what he said was very similar to you. He said the books, it almost feels like they come through you.
Yes, absolutely.
But this is this the book, Mary? Yeah,
That is
obviously
the
it
book.
is.
It's a
Yeah,
beautiful book.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
she's a fantastic woman.
I will grab a copy of that and I will read it.
Yeah.
So we're just going to pause briefly, and I think already you can see that there's a lot in this story from Madeleine, and one of the things that I'm keen to do is to take the sort of learning from people that tell wonderful stories like Madeleine, and help you with a structure. So as I've said before, every month, end of the month, I do an online event called Storytelling at Work, and it's all about giving you an edge, and how. I mean, I believe that stories not only can really help you, when you're dealing with trauma, but they can differentiate you. So if you're interested in coming along, it's at 25th of the month this month, and the link is in the usual places across the social networks. But it's great fun, and I really enjoy it. So, Madeleine, to bring it back to the sort of, so we've spoken about, and it was lovely how you told the story about the trauma and how the forgiveness, and that led you to think about therapy, and now you're doing what you're doing. What do you think? What is it about stories that makes them so powerful? What is it? Is there something that you've spotted that you think that's it?
Hmm.
You know,
I just think we've done it for thousands and thousands of years. Your little
yeah,
clip, there's people sitting around the fire. That all these stories that get passed down, some of them aren't even written. It's just verbal
yeah,
storytelling, isn't it? And it just connects us, I think. I think it's that human connection. It
yeah,
just speaks to people's hearts. And
hmm,
when we come out of our head, it's so much easier. When we're stuck in our head, we're very logic minded, but when you're in your heart, you just feel it. You don't even need the words.
yes,
One of my friends walks her dog every day and listens to my podcast in Germany, which is lovely to think of Amanda over there
excellent,
from Dundee
yeah,
in Germany. And
brilliant,
she's the one who said to me that she doesn't have anything in common with any of the stories, but every story she can find something that resonates with her.
Yes.
So you don't
Well,
have to have had the same story, you just
no.
see what they've done with it. I just think people are amazing.
The you're in Glasgow. We've got
Hmm.
COP26 happening in Glasgow right now.
Yes, I'm not going anywhere.
Um, yeah, yeah, you're confined to
The roads
barracks,
are all
aren't you? Yeah.
closed. Yeah.
And I think that I don't know. I mean, I didn't prep you for this question, so forgive me if it doesn't resonate at all. But one of the things that and it was the same with COVID actually.
Hmm.
There was an awful lot. I mean, I believe that I'm a former scientist. I mean, I'm very into. I look for data, but
Hmm.
facts tell. But it's stories that sell. It's the stories that change the world. It's not the facts.
Yep.
I've listened into a few of these talks already, and they haven't got it.
I haven't listened. I haven't even gone
No,
that
I,
far.
I, I don't recommend it. It's
Yep.
platitudinous garbage.
Yeah.
But how do we? Because I mean, it's a bit like at the beginning of COVID. I don't know how you feel about that either. I'm interested in your perspective. But they were bombarding us with numbers. They weren't talking about Jeannie, the 82-year-old woman who had got COVID and died round the corner. And it's as if Live Aid was supposed to have changed all of that, wasn't it? Back in the 80s, we're now talking about people and feelings
Hmm.
and emotion because facts just tell. They don't
Yeah, I
sell.
couldn't relate to the numbers, but I can relate to people
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I don't really understand all this COP26 stuff of all these people flying in meant to be saving the planet, but what about your carbon footprint? But yeah, I guess that's a whole other different thing.
Uh,
But yeah, no,
but
what was the question again? Sorry,
Well,
I
I know
got dropped off
sorry,
there.
I'm wittering because you're in Glasgow, and I can't help it when people are in Glasgow because I love the place. But how do we? Well, here's a question. take a question from it. So if you look at the NHS,
Uh-huh.
right, and you obviously have experience of the trauma, but also of helping people get through the trauma.
Hmm.
How do we help like policymakers, governments, MPs? To actually understand the importance of stories, because I still don't see a lot of it. Maybe I'm missing it,
Yeah.
but
Well, it's interesting because as a therapist, you would never reveal any part of you to your client, because
yes,
you're not really there to work yourself. And if that becomes an issue, then you need to speak to your supervisors. But yeah, but you're there to, I guess, help them work their story. And again,
mm-hmm.
it's different in therapy because it's not really their story, it's what they're doing with it. So it's about their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So it's
Right.
because you could get two people, say, for example, I would have two clients whose father died, and one would say, that's it, I'm never going to get over it, I'll be devastated and grief struck for the rest of my life. Or you can get someone that says, I'm so lucky he was my dad. I'm so grateful. What a
Mm,
fantastic guy. I'm going to live my life through the way he did every day. And so I always find that part interesting. What we do with what happens to us, how we walk it through, how are some people able to be resilient and some people just get stuck as in
yeah.
trauma. So to me, stories are so important. I don't know if
Mhm.
you know my dad's story. My dad had a huge, big story. He was a Holocaust survivor. And
Right.
people always think I became a therapist because of what happened to me. But it was really, if you met my dad, he mucked about. He was like a big kid. He'd lost his parents, his brothers and sisters. His youngest brother was just 7 when he was 6, Mordechai, when he was gassed in Auschwitz. So all his family were murdered.
Yeah.
But my dad loved life, he just lived life to the fullest. He met my mum. He had 5 of us. There's now 17 grandchildren, 3 great grandchildren. Sadly, he didn't see all of those, but
Yes.
he struggled to tell his story. But his attitude to life, he said, I'm not what happened to me. There's more of me than that. And so it's
Yes.
what we do with our stories, even if we don't speak our stories, it's what you do. It always comes down to that at the end of the day. But I
Yes.
do believe, like you, storytelling is the way forward. When I was at any TEDx I've attended or the one that I was speaking at, I sat and listened, and all the ones about theory and about
Yeah.
other stuff. If someone said, "What do they speak about?" I went, "Oh, hang on, I did listen, but I'm sure I heard some of it. I couldn't
Yes.
remember it." But the ones who shared their stories,
Yeah.
they were amazing. They just stick with you. They
Yes.
absolutely do. That
Yes.
the last person to speak was a lovely man called Amir Latif, who's gone on to do amazing things on TV. He's a
Right.
blind man. Actually lives in Glasgow as well. I
Mm-hmm.
think he's
Mm-hmm.
now in Leeds, but he's been on Celebrity MasterChef. He does walking in the
Oh, right.
Yorkshire Dales, and he
Mm.
has an amazing charity. It might have ended now, be called, oh, I had a fantastic name. It was like a sighted person and a blind person, and you travel together. Travel Eyes was this company.
Oh,
So a
nice. I like that.
sighted and a blind person, they travel together. So he's climbed the hills in Morocco. People will guide him with their sound, but he guides them with other ways. but he saw more than most people,
Yes.
and he
Wow.
trained as an accountant. He became head of an accountancy firm, and he's blind. And
Mm.
we're so limited by our thoughts and what we
Yeah.
see and how we are. And I thought, yeah, he sees more than other people. But it was his story that I really remembered at the end of the day, how he
Yes.
turned it round and how he just is so resilient and he wouldn't let it define him. And if anything, also he's grown through what he's gone through. It's
Yes.
it's not destroyed his life, which is what people think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think you mentioned the TED thing there again. The TED movement is kind of proof, isn't it, about the importance of stories? Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know it's got slightly tired. Maybe I think that I heard some people saying it's got. I don't agree with that, but some people have said that. But I think it's kind of proof, the evidence that stories are something that I mean, there's another one. Have you heard of the moth?
Oh, just in my head, moth. I love
Yeah,
moth as well. Yeah,
yeah, and
and you
it's
can
not.
always picture them in some little basement in New York or somewhere,
Yeah,
can't you?
yeah, and they do. I like the moth metaphor, because it's attracted to the light of
Yes.
stories. If you like, I don't even know if that's how they use the metaphor,
No,
but
but that is a nice metaphor.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if people haven't come across the moth, you should look at the
Yeah.
moth.
Good.
And there's a scientific one. This is very in my world. There's one called the Story Collider, which is all
Mm-hmm.
about scientific storytelling and
Mm-hmm.
science stories about science, etc. But anyway, that's we're going off on tangent there. Can I ask you though about the TED thing? What was that
Sure.
like? I mean, people are always interested to meet people who have done one of these things. What
Yeah.
was
Well,
that like?
people think you have to be invited. You just apply, you fill in an application form. I didn't get in the first time. I got in on my second application. My first meeting with him was terrifying. It was me in a room. I just got the note just a few days before to say we'd like you've made it through to the second round. Every TEDx local event will do it slightly differently. And I walked into a room and there was about 7 of them and one of me, and I had 5 minutes to sell myself, I guess, and share my story. And they
Yes.
were very divided. Afterwards they said,
Oh.
well, we didn't think you said your story very well. We were thinking of it was going to be better. And some of them said, well, who are we to tell her how we should tell her story? She did really well. So I made them ask a lot of questions. So I had another
Right.
meeting with them, and then I was away. So I had a meeting on Zoom, and then I had a phone call. And they said, if you're prepared to work with a coach, then we'd love to have you share your story. So they really put you through the ringers, Glasgow. They're
Right.
very,
Okay.
because I
Good.
think it's one of the 10th most popular one in Europe, the Glasgow event. It's got
Right.
a huge following. So it was
Yes.
amazing. I worked with a fantastic woman called Claire English, who's been a TV presenter, radio presenter up in Scotland, BBC for like
Yes.
30 years. I learnt loads from her. She also presented on the day with the fabulous Fred Macaulay, who
All
was
right.
brilliant
Yes.
as well. We had Annie Lennox there on the day. So
Oh gosh.
it was a brilliant day. Never got
Yeah.
to meet Annie, which was a shame. But hey,
Yes.
she had a separate changing room from us.
Oh, did she?
But
All right.
yeah, but
Okay.
as I said at the start, it was one of the most terrifying moments, but one of the most liberating moments as well.
Right. Fantastic.
And I'm able to share some details. I don't go into too much details, but I think it was called Unbroken, Speaking the Unspeakable. So people
Mm.
say, well, you shouldn't speak about that. It will distress people, but I can't be responsible with what people do with it. And I also don't want to sugarcoat it to make it easier for people to swallow. Now
Yes.
that I'm sharing my story, it took me years. I'm not
Uh-huh.
going to make it easier for people to digest. This is
Mhm.
what happened. And again, it's not about comparison, but I was lucky it was just one night. Some women, men have this every night of their life.
Yes.
If they're in an abusive relationship, it's not uncommon, my story. It really
Yes.
isn't.
Yes.
So I wanted to share it for many reasons. For me, to show people we can get through it, to give people hope.
Mhm.
And once I stood on that stage, I marched out onto that red dot. My knees were knocking. I thought to myself, actually, this isn't about me speaking now. It's about who's listening,
Oh,
and that really grounded me. I just thought this isn't about me anymore. I've just become a vehicle or a vessel to share this story to end the shame. That's maybe kind of like my mission in life, really now.
right. Ending the shame. I
Yeah.
think I think the point you make about who's listening is actually quite sophisticated. I often think that people just have this sort of switch where they almost, when you used the word earlier, vomit, they almost vomit out because
Yeah.
but they already know their own story.
Yeah.
They already know it. They don't know
Yeah.
what other people's stories are or their feedback or whatever. Have you had any? I mean, now if we could move now to I mean, coming towards the end, really. But I
Mhm.
mean, how do you now use all of this? You've got all this. You've got this canon of trauma, forgiveness, storytelling, experience as a therapist, etc. Where are you now? I mean, what are you doing with it now?
You know what? I never really plan anything. I just kind of go with the flow, and I
Yeah,
never know where life is going to take me. Luckily, because COVID came
yeah,
along, I didn't see that one coming, and
yeah,
I try not to make any plans because I never know what's around the corner, and life
yeah,
can surprise us at many times.
yeah.
But what I try to do, like I did on that red dot, is just to stay as centered and as grounded as I possibly can. And
Yes,
if I'm asked to do an interview, I will do an interview. I'd just say yes to everything, and before I would have said no. And you never know where one thing, what it
yeah,
leads to. So yeah, I just see where life takes me now.
yes. And where do you think 2022 is going to go for everybody? I mean, let's open it up. Really, do you think we're going to get back to normal, or I guess you hope they do,
But
but
I
what's
don't know,
normal?
will it ever be normal? And what is
Yeah,
normal anyway? Gosh, we could talk about that one forever. I don't
yeah,
know. I don't
yeah.
know. I hope be able to fly because my daughter gets married in Mallorca next July. So
Oh,
hopefully that will
oh,
be
lovely.
okay.
Lovely. And
Looking
what
forward to that.
the thing that we all have in common is certainly under the age of 70, I guess, is we're looking to make a living. We're out there looking to make a living. And how do you can you see the work that you're doing adding value to organisations? I mean, how do you think it could work in the corporate world, Madeline?
Yeah, I guess I have worked within
Have you?
corporate organizations. I've been
Mm.
invited to share my story there as well. And it's about resilience, it's about
Oh,
mental
man.
health, it's about well being, it's about recognizing signs when maybe somebody's struggling. It's about encouraging people to speak up, to find their
Yeah.
voice. It's about your employers, looking after their staff and
Yes.
hoping that they would be there for them if they are struggling. So, yeah, I guess there's many, many messages in my
Yes.
recovery that I can share with other people.
Hmm. Hmm. Have you seen the TV series? I think it's called Successor or Succession
No,
with
I haven't. I
Brian.
have a massive list on my phone of stuff to watch,
Uh,
but I should write that one down as well.
well, I don't know if I recommend it to you because
Okay.
it's a bit like Wolf of Wall Street type thing. But I worked in that type of environment for 20
Mhm.
years and I absolutely bloody hated it. I not only did I hate the environment, I hate the word hate. I don't even like using the word hate, but and there's bits of it I enjoyed, but the sort of the bullishness and the nasty men and women and that are in there thinking that they can just shout at you, bawl at you, and scream at you, and you're going to perform. I mean, it just
Yeah.
I don't understand it, to be honest.
I
One of
know.
the reasons I
What
went
what
in.
I really kind of learned out of lockdown because I used to do lives and I was doing my videos and
Yeah,
I had all the people around my house and it was noisy and it was I was panicking. I need
yeah,
peace and quiet. I was
yeah,
used to having an empty house and I had everybody home drinking gin and doing 5,000 piece jigsaws and it was like I can't cope. And I thought actually I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be
no,
human, really.
yeah,
And I think if we're more human and we can connect via stories and make us more human, that's really what it's all about at the end of the day, isn't it? Just be
yeah,
better
yeah,
human beings.
absolutely, absolutely, and it's something that Mariana said a couple of weeks ago. She said there's something about people in Scotland that are very good at telling stories.
Hmm.
I think that's
Yeah,
probably true
normally
of
at the
everybody.
bus stop at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, yeah. The late
Yeah,
bus on the way home.
it's like the difference between Edinburgh and Glasgow. In Glasgow, they'll chat to you no matter who you are and where you are.
Mhm.
They'll walk past you in Edinburgh. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's fair. And I love Edinburgh, but it is a bit different, isn't it? It's definitely a different
It,
place.
it is a bit, yeah.
Yeah. So my final question, really, and it's a question that I ask everybody. I mean, what's your favourite book? What's your favourite book? It
Oh,
can be a real, it can be a factual, it could be your one you mentioned earlier. It can be anything. What's your favourite book?
favorite book. I think for me, when I read Maya Angelou's
Ah,
I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, I
yeah.
didn't know that you could write about rape. I didn't know that
Mhm.
that was the first time I'd ever seen it written down and the impact of what it did to someone and how she walked through it. And that kind of gave me hope. And I read it quite a few times. And she was just the most
Ah,
extraordinary woman as well,
absolutely.
amazing, amazing woman.
Yeah,
Everything she writes or that I read just resonates with me. It just speaks
yeah.
to my heart because it's genuine, there's nothing fake, it's just real and people know when we're real and genuine.
Yes, I love those books, and I have to say, in her words, I think you're a phenomenal woman. I think that it's been a pleasure meeting you. But I
Oh,
mean, I've
thank
known
you.
you for ages, but we've never really had a long conversation, have we? There's always been some
Not
nonsense,
really.
and But I think you're phenomenal, and I really am extremely grateful for you coming on. And one of the people over on Facebook has said I could listen to Madeleine all day. Well,
Aw.
likewise.
Thank you, lovely
Uh,
Facebook user. It doesn't say your name, but thank you. Maybe
no,
someone I know.
there's a problem between the Restream technology and Facebook. They're all arguing with each other about who owns the data at the moment. It's a mess. Oh dear. But thank you. And if people want to get in touch with you or communicate with you or see your work, where's the best place for them
Well,
to
I'm
go?
on all the social media platforms, but I guess if you go to my website, madelineblack.co.uk, you can find me there and see what I'm up to.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, and I wish you well. And I'll be in Glasgow quite soon, so maybe we can have a
Yay.
cup of tea or even something a bit stronger.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
So I hope you all enjoyed that. I think the fact that that was all about a story, somebody's personal archaeology, someone's terrible experience, but the bit that for me that really jumps out is the forgiveness part. I don't know if Madeleine would agree with that, but that's the bit that I think, wow, could I do that? But it really is terrific, and it's something that's the sort of story you can say to people. Look, this is someone who went through that experience, and the way she got through it, partly anyway, was by forgiving, and I think that's quite amazing. And if you're into that sort of thing, it's quite spiritual. So I really enjoyed that. So thank you very much, Madeleine. So that's about it for this week. But there's a couple of things I just wanted to finish with, and one of them is about next week. Now we're changing tact again, which I really love about this show, and we're looking at some really specific applications of story. So today you heard about it being used in trauma, but I wanted to take it into the corporate world, as I touched on there with Madeleine. And next week I've got Nick Shackleton Jones with us, who is the learning and development director at Deloitte. And Nick has got quite a reputation. He's a bit of a rogue, which I really like. He's got his own perspectives, and I'm really excited about Nick coming on. If you've never come across Nick, his work is terrific, and some of his talks that are on all over YouTube, etc., are really good. The guy knows what he's doing in terms of learning and development. So we're going to come back to that next week. To finish, as I always do, and I think we've shown it today, that your own stories are much more powerful than facts. Facts are very important, but it's the stories that act as an empathy engine. And I'm sure what we've heard today resonates with those of you who have had a difficult experience. It is, unfortunately, as Madeleine said, there's a lot of you. But there is hope. There is something you can do about it. And I genuinely believe that a good story can act as an empathy engine. And then finally, and the key thing I say every single week, watch out for stories, because you know what, guys? Those stories can change the world. Thank you very much for tuning in to Artifact Live episode 53, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. My name is Scott McArthur, and this has been Artifact Live, the art and science of storytelling.